Welcome to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast, where we focus on how authors found success, looking at strategies that have taken them to the top of the bestseller charts, as well as what they've learned from their mistakes. Because being an indie author is more than knowing the latest marketing trend. It's about being innovative and creative and learning from your mistakes.
Welcome to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast. I'm Sara Rosette.
And I'm Jami Albright. And this week on the show we have
Kevin Tumlinson.
Yes, we do. We loved Kevin. We've known Kevin for a long time. And
we met him at the conference
when we met each other.
Yeah. Way back in the dark ages.
In 2015.
16.
No, 16, 2016. Yeah. And he's a great guy. He's a really smart guy. And he's been a digital nomad. And we talked about that.
Yeah. So we talked about that. And he had some interesting ideas for writing crossovers between your books, different series. And he is a discovery writer. And we talked about that, how he doesn't really plot. And so it was interesting. It was kind of different from some of the other interviews we've had.
Yeah, because he writes archaeological thrillers. So you would think that somebody like that would have to plot, but he doesn't. And it works really well for him. So it's just a fun interview. And he works with Draft Digital. So we got some information about that. And so anyway, it's a fun interview. So what's been going on with you this week?
Well, I think you should go first this week.
So two big things have happened this week. One, I started writing. So you probably don't care, but I finished my book in August, put it out in September, and I have not written a word since then. And I was really worried that I was blocked. Like burnout. I think I was just blocked when I went to Las Vegas to 20 books on the way home because I just had no ideas. I had nothing. And when on the way home on the plane, I got this idea. And so I started thinking about, I wrote one little thing, but it wasn't even, literally it was nothing. But I kept, the ideas kept coming. So I kept writing, I just jot them down and stuff. So I started the story and it's actually going really well. And
nice.
Yeah, so I'm excited about that. And then the second thing is what Sarah's talking about is I got my first tattoo yesterday. So I told y'all last week that my sister has lung cancer. And so when she got sick 9 years ago, I said, we all rally around, and I was thinking, what can we do to support her? And I did not want to shave my head. And it's a good thing because she never lost her hair. So that would have been horrible if I'd have done that. But I thought let's all get tattoos. So we got tattoos, or they all live in the same place. And we decided on sisters with this infinity symbol. And they all go get the tattoo. And I'm thinking it's going to be something like on their foot or on their shoulder, someplace that you can cover it up, for work and stuff. No, they got this thing on their arm, like on the underneath side of their arm. And it's about, 5 or 6 inches long.
For those of you who can't see, her hand is not her fingers are not an inch apart. They're they're like a big tattoo apart.
Yeah. I was working at a hospital. I could not have a visible tattoo. That was part of the deal. And I couldn't walk around with a bandage on it all the time because I was working with babies. People were like, are you infectious? And so I just didn't get it. But then 4 years ago, I quit the hospital job and I still haven't gotten it. And they give me so much grief for it. So I just decided yesterday I was going to go. This is what happens when you're not on social media for 2 weeks. You need a dopamine hit. And so you go get a tattoo. And so I go get the tattoo. I send them a picture and I said, now shut the hell up. So that is, get off my back. I got the tattoo. But yeah, I like it. Every once in a while I'll see it and I'll go, what is that? And I got a tattoo. But it didn't hurt that bad. And it's fine. Yeah. So
yeah,
I don't think I'll be getting a sleeve or anything like that. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but it was a little pinchier than I expected. So, but this is a good thing. I said, I'm 58 years old and getting my first tattoo. So, there you go.
Well,
so that's what's been going on with me.
That is
top that.
Well, I can't top that. I should have gone first. Because I did not get a tattoo this week. And the only thing I've done some writing, I've done some admin stuff. I have a book coming out next week. So that's book 7 in my historical series. So I've been doing some stuff to get ready for that. And also I've spent 2.5 days moving stuff from one storage unit to another. Because, like we moved and our kids have moved this year and they're in college and hopefully they're going to transition off out of the nest completely. But until they do that, we have some stuff. So my daughter and I have been moving stuff back and forth from storage units. And I was thinking like, this is one of those things that like, you think, oh, once they're out of the house, you have so much more time until, oh yeah, we have to go change storage units and stuff. So been doing stuff like that, not super exciting. Nothing like getting a tattoo. That's for sure.
No. Well, or writing a new story, which, the thing about the new story is that I have made myself laugh. And when I've since I had the idea, I've held it very close to my chest. Like I've only told one other person about it and she helped me. It's got a little bit of a weird part. And so she was like, oh, I think that's hilarious. And I was like, okay. And so, and that's Claire Taylor, because she's my story guru. And, but so I haven't really told anybody, but I've now told a couple of people since I've started writing it. And when I'm telling it, I'm laughing, they're laughing. And so I'm like, oh yeah, this is what it feels like. Yeah, this is what it feels like to write something really funny. I'm trying to keep it really simple because, my stories can get pretty complicated.
I know. Might get overcomplicated too. Yeah.
I know. I love some drama.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's what's been going on. But we should get on with the interview with Kevin.
We should. Yeah.
Because it's great.
Here is Kevin. Well, today we're really excited to have Kevin Tumlinson here. How are you, Kevin?
I am fantastic. How are you?
Good.
We're great. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, you're our first interview in the new year. So there you go.
And this is the first podcast I've done in the new year. So
all right. Well, this is
serendipitous. Is that the right word? Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, let me read your bio and we'll jump into the questions.
Sure.
Kevin Tumlinson is an award-winning and best-selling author of more than 50 novels, as well as several nonfiction books. He is known as the voice of indie publishing for his work in author-facing podcast, as well as his role as Director of Marketing and Public Relations for industry-leading book distributor Draft to Digital.
Yeah.
That sounds exactly like what I wrote. That's great.
That's perfect.
Well, before I ask the first question, tell us the podcast you actually host.
Right.
Oh, man. At one time, I was hosting like 8 podcasts at the exact same time. And that's not even an exaggeration. I'm probably best known for my show, the Wordslinger podcast, which had a good 7-year run. I put it on a hiatus when we got on the road traveling, just because it became too difficult to juggle that with some of my other responsibilities. Right now, I'm one of the rotating hosts for our Draft to Digital's Self-Publishing Insiders podcast, which we primarily do via live streams a few times a month. And I am currently the co-host of the Stuff That's Real That You Didn't Know Was Real, but also is cool podcast.
There you go.
With
okay,
Nick
you're going to have to send me that
link.
link.
Yeah, Nick Thacker. I knew it was going to be Nick Thacker.
That's a definite Nick Thackerism right there. So,
yeah, if you'll send me that full link, I'll put it in the show notes.
Yes, if you'll remind me, I will definitely do that. I believe it's stuffthat'sreal.com is the website. I could be wrong, but I think that's real. Yeah. And then other than that, I mean, I've either been a host, co-host, guest host, or narrator, of commercials and ads on practically every podcast you've ever listened to as an author. So
we do.
That's how I got the whole voice of indie publishing thing.
Yeah,
that's where that came from.
Yeah, we do hear your voice a lot as I rotate through my podcast listening.
Yes.
So that's great.
That's great. Okay, so now I want to ask you, how'd you get into writing?
So I was born and I practically had a pen in my hand, which was very painful for my mother. But no, I actually started, I joke about this all the time. I was writing, even before I was literally writing, I was dictating stories into a cassette recorder that I got for Christmas one year at a very young age. And once I started, I wrote I tell everyone this all the time. I wrote my first book. It was 5 pages on Big Chief notebook paper.
Oh, yeah.
Big fat practice pencils they give you. I wrote that at a very early age, like 5 years old. And that was kind of the beginning. So I was constantly writing short stories. I'd start books. For years, I had what I now call my thirds, which are like, I'd write the first third of a book, and then it would sit there forever. So yeah, I mean, it's really hard to pinpoint a start for my writing career because I started getting paid for writing way back like 12 years old. I was writing little like teen beat features for the local newspaper and getting paid for it.
Oh,
so
that's awesome. That's amazing. Yeah.
I too was one of those people that had lots of starts. I didn't know how to plot when I first got started. And so I still will find like notebooks and sheets of paper that I go through and I start reading and I'm like, this is pretty good. And then it just stops.
Yeah.
It stops.
What happened? And the story's gone.
Thank God for all those starters though, because later when I started writing and publishing novels, I didn't use these at first, but when I got into writing thrillers, I actually went back because I didn't know where to start. I was dared to write thrillers by Nick Thacker, who's going to come up a lot in
the instigator of most. Yeah,
he dared me to write. We were doing a show at that time called Self-Publishing Answers, another podcast, and he dared me on air to write a thriller because that was his genre. I was sci-fi, and so I started I took that dare and to get started, I went back through some of my thirds and found 2 or 3 different stories that had some potential. And I basically wove those into a prologue that became my first thriller.
Oh, cool.
And that's where it came from. In fact, the whole like convoluted, twisted plot of that thriller is thanks entirely to the fact that I had these like 3 or 4 starters that I needed to make sense with each other. And so it became a plot for a thriller novel at that point. So
that's amazing. That's great. It's like recycling of your content.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. So don't throw away those starters.
Yeah.
Don't keep that stuff and use it. I have my wife and I refer to it as our drawer. Put that in the drawer. That's where it's like that junk drawer in your kitchen where there's 5 pairs of broken scissors and 3 empty cigarette lighters. Like that.
All the valuable stuff. Yeah.
All the valuable stuff.
And an empty roll of Scotch tape.
Spent batteries for days.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Well, what is your definition of success?
Success is the ability to do what you love, regardless of income. That's success. Yeah. And, I have definitely proven myself successful in that front over the years. Because most of my career was spent writing for no money whatsoever.
Yeah.
But yeah, money's good. But I had to divorce myself from the idea of money as success a long time ago, or I would constantly feel like I was a failure. Once I embraced the idea that success is doing the thing that I love without limits, then suddenly things started to take off. It actually had a real impact on the momentum of my career at that point, just because, once I did start making some money from writing and publishing, it fluctuates,
Oh yeah.
I mean, kind of a shallow era of income for writing right now compared to years previous. But I still feel like a success because that my definition of it didn't include or no longer includes, I got to make this much money. So, which isn't to say I don't want more money and I don't get anxious and stressed out when the money starts dwindling, but
yes,
it doesn't define whether or not I'm a success.
Right. So. And I think that's so healthy. And, that's so funny because we've heard that more in the last 6 months from really successful authors than we have the entire time we've been doing this podcast. So I think that there is a little bit of a mind shift in the community about that. And I think it's healthy,
I think it is healthy. And I do like to see it. And of course I work with literally thousands of authors. And the authors who kind of come into the business always more or less have the same hangups. They always, it's how do I make more money?
Right.
And they hate hearing, any advice that says don't focus on the money. And I understand why.
Right.
Because writing a book is hard. I mean, it's
so hard.
I've written probably close to 60. I said 50 in my bio, but I've written probably close to 60 full-length novels and nonfiction books at this point. And every single one of them was if not harder, then at least as hard as the one before and the very first one I wrote, So yeah, that's hard work. And so you want to get paid for that.
Yeah.
So I understand. Yeah.
Yep. So what do you wish you'd known about writing in craft when you started?
When it comes to craft, so, I was very hung up on when I first started, the idea that I had to have these elaborate plots, everything written out, know the ending before I start, all those things. What I wish I had known at the start that I think would have made my life a little less stressful is that for every author, that those things are slightly different when it comes to craft. Like, if you're looking for answers like, I learned that pacing my plot, I don't have any advice on that side. Well, I do actually, I might, but it's not a wish I knew kind of thing. But I just wished I had known that I didn't have to spend myself on things that were not really part of my makeup,
right,
in order to get a good book. And I always felt guilty about my books. I always felt guilty because I'm a pantser, right? So I don't write outlines. I've tried, and every now and then I kind of try again. And sometimes I have a little bit of success, but for the most part, I don't outline. So the thing I wish I had known was that it's okay to be like that.
Right.
I
tortured myself for the first 4 or 5 books because I felt like I was cheating.
Yeah. Yeah.
By just going into it, huh?
Or just jumping into it.
Or for me, sometimes I feel like, I can't start if I don't know, for romance, the black moment, I need to know that. And I started a book yesterday and I don't know the black moment. I know a lot of things leading up to it, but I guess I've realized as I'm writing, I will figure that out. I've just kind of decided to trust myself and make sure, and just keep reminding myself, I can figure this out. Because what happens with me is I get stuck and then I just panic and I don't write for, 3 weeks or whatever.
I will get stuck too. And there is a tendency to want to panic. But what I discovered, and part of this is because, so I say I'm a pantser and that I don't plot or outline. And that is true.
Right.
But what I've discovered over the years is that I actually do a lot of plotting and outlining. I just do it in long form, and I don't do it before I start writing. I do it as I write.
As I write. Mm-hmm.
I will reach those muddy middles and bog down and feel like, I'm a fraud and I'm going to fail, whatever. But what has worked for me is to loop back. And I'm sort of stealing this concept from Dean Wesley Smith. He does it in shorter bursts. He does it in 500-word bursts. I go all the way back to the beginning of the book, or to that day's writing. I typically loop back to that day's writing and edit before I go on. But when I get stuck in the middle, I go back to the beginning and I read and rewrite as I go. And then when I get to where I stopped, I've got momentum and I keep going.
Oh, that's a good idea.
So that's how I sort. And then the thing is, early in my career, you couldn't have held a gun to my head and had me do that. Rereading and rewriting my work was just off the table, hard stop. But, you learn as you go that it's actually not as bad as you think. And it's actually 4 times more useful than even the most exuberant supporter of that idea would have you believe.
Right.
So,
yeah, that's very good.
Do you find that you've already done a lot of your editing? Like when you actually get to the end, do you have less time spent editing because you've kind of been doing it all along?
So the evolution of editing for me went from absolutely no editing on my part to a smattering of editing using mostly software to now I've got this, what I call my edit stack. And what I have been told by my beta readers is that over time I'm delivering to them much cleaner manuscripts. So what I don't feel is, I'm editing. What I feel like when I'm doing is I'm engrossed in the story, and then I see something and I fix it as I go. So yes, I guess the real answer is I do find that I have fewer edits to make at the end. I am a strong advocate that you should not edit as you write.
Right.
But this is what I consider an editing phase when I loop back. So I am writing and I am adding to the story as I go, probably introducing all kinds of new errors as I go. But for the most part, it comes out fairly clean. And then I use tools like I used to use Grammarly. I've kind of backed away from Grammarly. I use Pro Writing Aid to help me scan through and find, issues that are easy to find. And then I have my edit team, my ARC readers or beta readers or street team or whatever phrase you prefer. I call them a street team.
Right.
I have them read it and provide feedback, and then I go and make those edits too. So, it's a process. And what I've learned, what I eventually learned is that I actually kind of enjoy it. I used to hate people, by the way. I'd read Writer's Digest and I'd want to strangle every single author who said this, but I've come to love the edit and rewrite phase.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like being a participant in a novel. Like, if I were, reading something by John Grisham or something, and I spot a typo or whatever, I can't fix it.
Yeah.
And I can't add to the story. Like if I read a plot point, I'm like, oh man, what if they said this? I can't go add that. But I can when I'm reading my own stuff. So it's almost like a participatory sport at that point.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah. That is really interesting because I much prefer to edit rather than compose. Like for me, the hardest thing to do is to come up with new words. But then once I have them, I can go in there and work on them. And I have a general idea of where I'm going, but I'm more like you. I go back, and if I get stuck, I go back and I read what I've done before. And then sometimes I'll work on it. And I feel like when I get done, the book is in pretty good shape. So maybe it takes me longer overall to write a book, but then I don't have, you don't have as long of editing. So
you're going to spend that time no matter what. I mean,
one way or the other. Yeah.
So you might as well do it in a way that you enjoy. I will say that is probably the biggest advantage I have in my writing career is that I am very comfortable with that existential crisis known as the blank page. Like I can write and write well and write a lot and very quickly. It's just something, it's a skill I developed over the years. I think my work as a professional copywriter probably helped a lot with that. But I've always been very good at just, as my friend Bob says, word vomiting.
There you go.
And it comes out looking like art. So
that's funny.
I'm the Andy Warhol of writing. Just splatter it on the page and call it art.
That's great. Well, but I think you do a little bit more than that too, probably. So what about marketing? What do you wish you had known about marketing?
For one, I wish I had known from the start that marketing isn't always purely about data. or about ads or all those things that people get so hung up on. I talk to authors about this stuff all the time. Marketing is any effort you make to, by my definition, marketing is improving the odds that the right reader will discover your work at the time they're ready to buy it. And anything can actually qualify as marketing. So I wish I had really had that concept in mind when I started, because there were so many opportunities I passed and so much money I threw away trying to market the books. And by no means have I mastered marketing, despite my reputation and experience and all the things that should indicate that I should be a marketing master. But the truth is, I'm still figuring it out as I go, just like everybody else. And you try things and you see what works. And sometimes things stop working. So, I think what I wish most that I had known is probably that marketing is just about anything. And B, your ability to pivot is the most important part of marketing. Like your ability to change your plan on the fly as you detect that something's either working or not working is your best asset.
Yeah, that's really smart. I don't think I really knew that either. I don't think I knew that, just anything I did to get my book in front of people or get people, have it available when they're ready to buy, like you said, was marketing. I thought it was paid ads like everybody else. So
and those have their place, right? I mean, that's a very important part of marketing. It does not work for everyone. Which is something else I wish I had known. Because I probably could have saved myself a cool $100,000 on marketing expenses, but that's just
live and learn.
Lessons you learn.
Yeah, exactly. What assumptions did you make at the beginning of your writing career, and looking back, did they turn out to be right or wrong?
The classic is that I assumed if I simply wrote a book, people would in fact buy it.
Yeah.
I've got about 5 years of data that proves that's false. But I think, there's a whole gamut of assumptions I made as an author. I, like a lot of authors, assume that you have to be vetted by someone in order to be in the business. You have to be, there are rules to the game. And there are, to an extent. I made the assumption early. Actually, one assumption I made early has been met out. I assumed now you have to remember, when I started, it was like way back in like 2006.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, I've been publishing independently for a very long time, but the whole assumption I made from the start was that my book needed to be it needed to be indiscernible from a traditionally published book. And that turns out to be absolutely correct. Like I early on, and thank God I have assets. Like I'm a designer as well. Like I've done graphic design. So I was able to design my own covers. I was able to figure out layout. I was able to figure out all these different mechanics to make the book look, as my friend Bill once said, it looks like a real book. So, which, by the way, is a phrase that plagues us in this business. Like
so much. Yeah.
I only read real books.
Yeah.
Like.
Like, does that include like?
I'm shaking my head like that.
I want to see a concrete definition of real book. Excludes everything I've been doing for the past 15 years.
Right.
Yeah. Well, have you ever made a mistake that turned out to be a good thing?
Yes. In
good.
fact, lots of times. But one in particular was when I published my first book by myself, not through anyone else. When I published my first book, it was a sci-fi book that I had really only written because I was working with my brother-in-law and my good friend on what we wanted to be a web series at a time when there was no Netflix, Hulu, any of that. And I was having a hard time getting my head around the concept. So I wrote a treatment for the series that it became the first novel. And when I published it, after discovering that there was self-publishing available to me beyond paying someone, like I went to Amazon's whatever KDP was called at that time. And when I published it and when I created the cover and everything, I put the words book 1 of 3 on the cover for some reason. And then for like the next 3 years, seriously regretted that because the people who did discover the book were demanding book 2. And at that time, it was still taking me forever to write it. But I have some journal entries that from that period, and I've gone through them over the years, and I'll find this one and it says like, here's my goals for this year. Find 2 hours per week to write. And it cracks me up now because it's like 2 hours per week. I mean, what was I getting done? The book description, I guess. But I was not slicing off time regularly to write at that point. And so it took me years to write each book for a while. So I just dreaded every time someone bought the book, I was like celebrating the sale, dreading the email because everyone wanted to know when's the next one. So, when I wrote the second one, then it happened again. I'm like, I still owe the world a third book. And I started to seriously consider like ditching the whole dream at that point because I'm
pressure,
like, it's too much. But no, that turned out to be one of the best things I could have done to myself. I mean, I'm present day Kevin was shaking his fist at past Kevin, but it turns out past Kevin was a sort of accidental genius because I could not my personal OCD would not let me leave that series unfinished. And so I wrote the third book was when the game changed for me because I wrote that. And I'm at a time when I decided I had discovered like these self-publishing podcasts. I discovered at that time I discovered Smashwords. I just all these resources, and I was listening to a ton of stuff, watching things on YouTube, and I thought, I can't do this. I can't build a business around being an author if I've only got 2 books out there. And if I'm only putting out a book every like 4 years, it's just not going to work. So that's when I developed what I now call my 30-day author formula, which really just amounts to put your butt in a seat and write a certain number of words every day. But
it's like do the hard work, huh?
Here's the formula for writing success. Actually write. And now once I did that though, I'm like, okay, I wrote that third book in 15 days. Then I thought, well, how can I repeat this success? So I started a completely different trilogy. I mean, I purposely made the same mistake again. I wrote a YA fantasy series that I knew was going to be 3 books long. And I wrote the first 2 books over 60 days. And the third book I took my time on, but at that point I was chunking out, a book every 30 days for a while.
And I bet you were spending more than 2 hours a week writing, right?
I was spending more than 2 hours a week writing, ironically enough. I mean, it really kind of came down to, like, I think about that now. I'm like, now these days, because of my schedule and other responsibilities, I do a couple of hours of writing each day. And because I'm very fast, it means I can hit my targets. Like my minimum word count is 2,000 words now. It used to be much higher, but I typically overshoot that to like around 4,000 to 6,000 words every day. And that's within a 2 to 3 hour period each morning. So, those skills came because I forced myself into the rhythm of a minimum word count each day. It started off as 1,500 words, and 1,500 words will get you a book in a very short amount of time if you're willing to do it, especially if you don't edit until you've got the words on the page.
Right.
So that's my favorite mistake.
That's great.
Book 1 of 3.
Yeah, that's really good. And it doesn't matter. Like if you start out slow and it takes you a long time to write that first book, that's okay. Because I wrote my first book during my kids' nap time, like a couple of times a week. So like I had like 30 minutes, maybe 2 or 3 times a week. And it took me like years, like 4 or 5 years to really get it done. But then like once you've done it and you know you can do it again, hopefully, fingers crossed, then you maybe get more time and do it faster.
It's the 4-minute mile. It's the, it was impossible until they did it. And then it became routine to do it. And I think that in a lot of ways, we authors can kind of cut our own throats when we start seeing success, and then we peel off from the other distractions, quote unquote, of our daily lives to just write full time. I've done full time writing. Nick, Thacker has done full time writing, and you kind of get to a point where you are doing less with full time than you were when you had to write between naps and commutes to work and that sort of thing.
Exactly.
And I think the reason that is because you only have this limited amount of time, it becomes precious. And so you turn off all distractions, put away the phone, you close the door, and then you sit and concentrate on it to squeeze the most life out of it, so that you can get something on the page before you have to go do the rest of your life. Right. I think that is absolutely the right way to work. I think authors should be looking for ways to write around their lives, not make writing their life.
Yep. I agree. And in fact, I've been doing some consulting calls lately, over the holidays and stuff. Well, since I spoke at 20 books, but especially if the question is how can, I want to make this a full-time thing and stuff. My first thing is, let's talk about this first. You may not need, that may not be the best path for you to write full-time. Frankly, I don't know that it was for me. Like, I think I know I did more when I was working than I do being a full-time author. I just don't want a job. So that's another issue.
Trust me.
I don't want to work for anybody.
Has been an amazing opportunity for me, because the nature of Draft Digital is it's formatted very much like an author career. Yeah. My work there, they mesh together because, I have some flexibility in my schedule and that sort of thing, because I'm remote and, whatever. And I think for a lot of authors, like, the idea is, well, I want more time to do this thing I love. And I think you can get there. But here's what I think is interesting. Every successful author I know, from indie publishing to traditional publishing, when they get to that level where all they have to do is write and publish, they always take on other stuff. Yeah. They start a small business, or they start consulting, or they start a charity. Yeah. All of them. I was talking to Kevin J. Anderson, and he's doing the same thing. And Jonathan Mayberry, same thing. Like we all realize, even Stephen King, by the way, Stephen King's got all kinds of little side hustle things that he's involved in, and almost everything ends up being related to your publishing work. But I think the key is, we're not designed to sit for 10 hours a day, 8 hours a day, even doing nothing but writing. I mean, that we're supposed to go out and experience other things so that we bring all that back to the writing. The writing is an expression of life. It's not meant to be the only thing we ever focus on. And that's a hard truth for a lot of these authors, because there's the assumption that should be questioned, is that if I become a full-time writer, I'll be able to just kind of kick back with my smoker's jacket with my pipe,
yeah,
clacking away on an underwood in my cabin in the woods somewhere.
Yes. Yeah.
You could totally do that, but they're going to call you the Unabomber and you're going to end up going to prison at some point.
Maybe not the best.
Oh my gosh. Well, let's talk about finding your genre. Like, how did you decide on archaeological thrillers? Like, how did you land there? I know that just with the discussion we had before that you have kicked around the idea of cozies and some other things. So how did you land on archaeological thrillers? There you go.
I first should say that sci-fi was sort of my first passion for writing. But I never fit with sci-fi in any of the subgenres.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Because the stuff I wrote was more like the kind of thing that Orson Scott Card writes. It's like, it's technically sci-fi, but it's not like what you see on the shelves other than his stuff. It's not really what you find. And so I was having a tough time really kind of finding my I felt like I had a voice. I just didn't feel like I had a core audience.
Right.
Or couldn't identify them. When Nick Thacker dared me to write a thriller, the first thing that came to mind for me was movies like Indiana Jones, books and films like The Da Vinci Code, National Treasure. That was the kind of story I really enjoyed. And so I landed on, this archaeologist. Now I kind of hedged my bets and made him this like polymath who's my primary character's name is Dan Kotler, Dr. Dan Kotler. And he's an archaeologist, FBI consultant, and troublemaker.
Yes.
So not too dissimilar from me. I don't have FBI credentials, but so the idea was I gave him outside skills and background. Like he has a PhD in anthropology specifically, but also in quantum physics.
Well, there you go.
I was afraid that was me kind of staying close to the shores of sci-fi. In case I wanted to go back. And
in case you needed to take him off planet.
Yeah. If I ever decided, well, okay, this guy's clearly going to be abducted by aliens, at least I could.
Good to go.
So why would he be there? Now, it turned out that was an interesting twist. Later in the series, I used that. I wanted to explain why that was because I'd taken a little bit of criticism from reviewers, some of whom showed a clear misunderstanding of what it means to have multiple PhDs. But, God bless them, as we say in Texas. But here's a tip for authors. When you make a mistake, don't try to correct it in the book that you've released. Find a way to turn it into a plot point for a future book. Right. So there are a couple of examples of that for me. One of them was, giving Kotler this physics background that I later explained, like his parents turned out to be, one was a physicist and the other was technically a mathematician, but they had an interest in archaeology. Right. And so those things all fed this character. Right. And so they tragically died. And so in an homage to them, he pursued all their fields. Like he became all they were. Except he's lousy at math. Because I'm lousy at math, but even as an engineer. But the other thing one of the other mistakes I made that I embraced and turned into something, and it's big now, was that I had to justify having Kotler working with the FBI so consistently. I created this special unit within the FBI that I called historical crimes. And it was a typo. It was supposed to be historic crimes. So I made a typo and then it just stuck. I was stuck with it. And rather than go back and reformat that name out of the book where I introduced it, I wrote in the next book a whole bunch of jokes about like, well, shouldn't it be historic crimes? Why historical crimes? And, the FBI agent is kind of a grouse. And he's like, I didn't name the department, Kotler. And so it became like this joke that it was a sort of bureaucratic typo that became a department. And
just exactly how it would work in the government.
Would probably work that
yes,
way,
exactly,
right?
exactly.
So now that historical crimes is, and maybe I've got it reversed. I actually may have just lied to you guys on
it may be historic crimes.
It's historic crimes, not historical crimes. I flipped it. Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
It is historic crimes, but should have been historical crimes.
Yes, yes.
So historic crimes has become a functional agency within my world. And what it did was allow me to connect. When I created a new series, my technological thrillers, so the story there's a woman named Alex Kane. She has a sophisticated AI that basically is a digital skeleton key. And she's been framed for murdering her business partner and trying to sell state secrets to the Russians. Mm-hmm. So she's been a fugitive. And because she's got this super AI, she's been on the run now for 3 or 4 years and always ahead. She's very clever and she's always ahead of the game. So she's evaded capture, but she's like the number one fugitive on the planet. But because she's innocent, she's helping the disenfranchised, people who've been kind of looked past by the FBI and other law enforcement and didn't receive the justice they should receive. And so she helps them. She's like a one-person A-team, you know?
Yeah.
And so because of that work, there's an FBI agent pursuing her. She sort of becomes a confidential informant, still a fugitive. They'll still take her to prison if they can get her, but she helps the FBI with certain things.
Oh.
And so because of that, I was able to lump all those under the historic crimes label.
Oh.
And so connect those two worlds. So I've had crossovers.
Oh, that's
with her
so smart.
And
yes.
Kotler.
Yes.
So, and people love both series individually, but when I do a crossover, it's like people lose their, it's the Avengers effect. Like people just lose their mind.
Exactly.
So do you do crossovers a lot? Do you have a lot of crossover books or is it just like a cameo appearance?
So what I've done is I've started treating it as, okay, this is something I completely stole from comic books. I'm just going to be honest. They're all in the same universe, so they occasionally reference each other in the books. Mm-hmm. Sometimes characters from one book will make guest appearances in the other books.
Right.
But what I do is have essentially I've got multiple series anyway, but we'll say I've created a third series that is just historic crimes, and those are crossovers. Now I've only released one official book in that so far, but it was where the two characters met. Mm-hmm. And then spinning from the events of that, things happened in Kotler's books that would have had like a national, international impact. And so I had that bleed over into the next Quake Runner book, Alex Kane, where she's dealing with some of the consequences of that. Like she was asked to help out with that. So I have a scene in that book where she's helping, and then she goes on with the rest of her A-line story. Mm-hmm. So it's not direct crossovers all the time, although sometimes I will have, like I had Kotler and her on a Zoom call. But it's to remind readers that those two characters exist in the same world. And if you're interested in this, you might be interested in that. So it's a sort of a way to cross-sell and cross-promote.
That's super smart. And if our listeners are taking notes, this is a good thing to take notes on, because this is how you create sell-through to all your books, because you've created a world inside a world. And I think that's so smart.
What's interesting is the readers who prefer one series over another get mad when I release the other books.
I know.
So, or I'll have Kane, Kotler appear in one of Kane's books, and the readers of the Kotler books are mad because now they got to go buy a Kane book to see what Kotler's up to.
Oh, well, that's how it works. Yeah. So tell us what you work for Draft Digital. Tell us what's new and what's happening and coming in 2022 with Draft Digital.
Well, I can't tell you the the really cool stuff that's coming in 22 yet.
Okay.
But I can hint strongly that there's something truly amazing, mind-boggling amazing that's going to happen in 2022.
Wow.
Probably within the next 30 days. So
Ooh.
that's the most I can tell you without being fired.
Okay.
But
we don't want you to get fired.
Yeah, be on the lookout. It's exciting. I mean, it's very, very exciting. I can't wait until I can fully announce it and talk about it. But in other news, I mean, we've done some pretty cool things. 2021 was almost a recovery mode for 2020.
Yes, for all of us.
That was interesting in terms of the indie publishing scene. 2020 actually, I hate to say this, I don't want to get nasty emails or anything, but it was sort of a good time for authors because ebooks sold through the roof over 2020 because people were running out of Netflix basically and stuck in their homes. But then you would have anticipated, and we anticipated that once things started to kind of calm down on the pandemic front, that and life sort of resumed something close to normal, that ebook sales would trend down, and they did, but not to levels below where they were prior to 2020. They actually stayed much higher and have continued that year over year now. And so we were very excited to see that, and that's good news for the authors. And so 2021, we spent some time kind of refining some of the stuff that we already do. We added new things. We added BorrowBox, for example, as a distributor for Australia, library systems. We just announced that we did this. This happened. We didn't do this per se, but all our authors can now get into the Kobo Plus has expanded their distribution to Australia, New Zealand, a few other places. And, so all those things happened, but we were working on, we have our D2D print. We retooled that from the ground up, based on a variety of factors. Feedback from the users was a big one. We switched print partners. So, we have a whole new print partner, versus when we started. And that necessitated a few changes on the back end. There's now a fee associated with certain things, but we hate charging fees. So we've worked out a way to cover you for one of the fees on changes. So now, if you upload your print book, you get a free change to that print book every 90 days. If you need to make changes between there, you can pay for a change token to make that change. Is like $25. That's because we're being charged for that. So we're basically covering you on one free change every 90 days. So for most authors, I mean, we're so used to the immediate, my ebook has a typo in it, I'm going to upload a new one and it's out tomorrow and it's free of charge. We really wanted it to work that way for print, but it just can't because of the nature of publish on demand. So we had to come up with this system, and because we don't like charging authors for things, we figured out a way to do it. We're going to eat the cost of one change per book, per quarter, basically. So there, those things, but there's been huge things that it's like nothing so exciting that I could describe it to you, but it's big deals. Universal Book Links, we did update that.
Well, I was going to say, one of the things I'm most excited about is the print option for the Universal Book Links. I've been wanting that for ages, and that just came out, right? Yeah. So, now I need to go in and update everything, which hasn't happened. But
to me, that's the challenge, because it's the nature of it's so hard to explain this to people, but ebooks can be scraped automatically. The print books and audiobooks, there are some challenges to that there's just no way to automate it right now. So we are, it's still a manual ad,
right?
And we're working to improve that
option to do that, which before. So now it will take time to go in and add those links. But now I will truly be able to give people one link and say, here you go. It's got audiobooks, ebooks, and print books. So,
and under print, it's both paperback and hardcover.
Yeah.
So you can expand that quite a bit. So I know Amazon's now got their KDP print now has a hardcover option. Or if you're using Ingram or someone else to do your hardcovers, you can link to those in your universal book link. So
great. That is awesome. So we wanted to talk to you a little bit about Draft Digital, and we will keep an eye out to see what's coming. Whatever that mysterious,
it's going to be big. I'm not kidding. It's exciting.
So that is
and
cool.
Unexpected.
All right. Well, we will watch for that. And then the other thing we wanted to touch on with you was being a digital nomad, because you spent a couple of years, right? Like moving around and living in different places. So
living in a bus and a van. And
we actually.
What would you say are the pros and cons? Like, tell us a little bit of how you did it. And then what do you think are the good? And if somebody's thinking about doing that, what should they be aware of?
We kind of started in an RV, like a big giant motor coach. And we lived in that for a couple of years traveling. And then we we went through a couple of apartments. And when we got back on the road in 2020, like that's a whole other story, but we tried to trade. We bought a travel trailer, like a 19-footer and a pickup. And so we were in that for a few months and decided to get a van, because in a van, we can pick up and go anytime we want. We don't have to go. If we decide we're 2 hours away from the campground and we decide we don't want to go back, we've got a bathroom, stove, shower, everything's there in the van. So that turned out to be like the best thing we ever did. So we got that, and it's been about 2 years since we've been moving around in that, periodically staying in with Kara's folks or something, usually for holidays or something. The tips, as far as how to do this, for one of the things I would say right off is, if you have the ability to do it, you should totally do it. Even if it's instead of buying something to live out of, you just stay in Airbnbs for a couple of years, moving from place to place. The advantages of this are you are exposed to so many different types of people, bits of history, local experiences that you likely would never experience otherwise. Because we just over the summer left and went up into like the New England area and went up into New York, and we spent 2 or 3 months kind of driving around up there before we started going to conferences in the South. And we stayed in places that you never would have stayed in if I said we're going to go to New York and stay for a month or for a couple of weeks or a weekend. We went to places that you wouldn't have gone to like that, and spent real time there, and became locals for a while. And because of that, I picked up on things like dialect and characterization, things that I can use, and local history. So there's and some of that has been worked into plots in my books. So it's just this. It's a way to recharge your writing batteries for sure. And because we were working while we were doing it, it wasn't just vacation. My wife and I both work for Draft Digital at this point, and all this stuff feeds into my writing, but it also helped with the work I do for D2D. Being out and about and meeting authors where they live is kind of a big deal. It's good for them and good for us. But in terms of advice, one of the things I did was I found I got this prepaid phone from using a service called Visible, which is on the Verizon network, and I used that as a hotspot for everything, because it has truly unlimited tethering and data. That's like $40 a month. That was probably the best investment I made. But the point of that is have multiple ways to get on the internet, because you're going to need it. sometimes, the pandemic early on made it impossible to do things like go to a Starbucks, but we had all these different means of getting on the internet. Be ready to, what people forget about is drive time. So if you think, well, I'm in Florida and next month I'm going to be in Colorado Springs, you might want to start making your way towards Colorado Springs immediately, because the thing that killed us. Yeah, I mean, it was. You don't think about it because you're like, okay, that's a month or 3 months out.
Yeah.
But like just getting from St. Pete's Beach, Florida, our air conditioner on the van, our overhead AC went out, and we were having a hard time finding anyone to fix it. Well, I found someone in Houston, and so we were like, okay, when we leave St. Pete's at NINC, we're going to go to Houston. We were going to go there anyway. We'll just leave immediately and we can get there in time for this appointment. Well, it didn't really occur to me, but that was like 3 or 4 solid days of driving 8 to 10 hours a day. And, by the time we got there, first of all, I'm not doing any work while I'm driving.
Yes.
And second of all, once I got there, I was like burnt out so bad that I couldn't function for a week. So I guess my advice would be, as tempting as it is to dream about, I'm going to be in this place, and this place, and this place, you really should aim to spend longer swaths of time and move sort of in turns across the country and enjoy where you are. And by doing that, by the way, like if we had not been in a rush, we wouldn't have done it that way. The travel we did in the past was like 4-hour limits, right? Like 4 hours or 4 o'clock. That was my rule. And so we would drive for 4 hours and we'd stay for a few days and then drive another 4 hours and move across the country that way. Or we might stay a week or a month or whatever. That gives you time to recharge and experience these places. And because you do it that way, you end up in places you never would have discovered otherwise.
Right. Right. And it gives you time to work. I mean, if you're only driving, you can't work. Yeah.
Right. Because I cannot dictate.
No.
And even if I could, I wouldn't do it with Kara sitting 3 feet from me.
It's just awkward.
It's awkward. I hate the whole like adding punctuation as I talk, period.
Well, and to try and do it while you're driving, I think like some people can do that. I could not. That's just like too much going on.
Well, what I can do while driving is, my brain never shuts down. So, I can think through story and characterization and stuff, and not in a formal way, but just in a, like play a movie in my head. Like, what would Alex Kane do in this situation? And so even if that stuff never quite makes it onto the page, I think that's good development time for authors.
Yeah. Becca Syme calls that incubation time, where you're just thinking and kind of getting all your plot points down and how you want the scene to go. So it can be really valuable. Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong. I'd rather be writing.
Yes. Yeah. But still, sometimes you can't. Yeah. Very good. Well, Kevin, it's been so great having you here. Tell us what you think the best thing you've done to set yourself up for success has been.
There's so many things that I would qualify as a good answer for that. I think number one, developing the daily writing discipline did a lot. I mean, that alone, they say your best marketing tool is your next book. So that was a big part of it. But a very close second, I mean, maybe even on the same level, is I would say connecting to the community, but I think it's actually a level higher than that. It's find your team, find the people who are like you, who think, and operate in much the same way you do, who have the same passions, and create a little group of no more than 5 people that you can just, it's like a mastermind in a sense, but it's people who understand what you're doing and understand what you're going through and are going through the same struggle. You should always try to connect with people who are operating at a level higher than you. But you should also have your sort of core team of like, it's kind of like the Inklings, right? If you're familiar with that, with J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and those guys, I have my the group is currently called, Thacker Stacks, Dempsey Dollars, and Kevin Coins. And it's me, Nick Thacker, and Ernest Dempsey. And we all write in the same genre. We all write essentially the same sorts of books. We're all at the same general level of success. And so that has been it's just been an amazing experience to have those two guys. We share in jokes and crude jokes, and we're very much alike. We share all the things. We rarely talk about writing and publishing in that group. But when we do, it's sort of, hey, I'm thinking about trying this. And Ernie says, I did that and it's stupid. And, we give each other that kind of practical advice. So you should have that. I think that, along with a discipline is it's inevitable that you'll succeed.
That's great.
That is great advice.
It is.
I agree too. Yeah. Well, where can people find out more about you?
So if you go to kevintumlinson.com, that's going to link to literally everything important about my career, including Draft to Digital. If you're an author and you're wanting to know more about Draft to Digital, you can go straight to drafttodigital.com.
Okay. Awesome. We will have all those links in the show notes. And just thank you so much for being here today. This has been great.
I love it. Thank you for having me. A great way to start the new year.
It is. Right. Yes.
All right. Well, and thanks to Alexa Larberg for producing the podcast and Adriel Wiggins for the podcast administration. You can find all the links at wishidknownthenpodcast.com, and we'll see everybody next week. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast. We hope this episode inspired you, empowered you, and made you laugh a little bit too. If you loved it, tell your friends about it. And if you feel so inclined, leave us a review. We look forward to being with you again next week.